There is a quiet moment many people reach in life. It doesn't come with drama. There is no financial collapse, no sudden loss. From the outside, everything still looks fine. You have a steady income, you pay your bills, you are responsible. You've done what you were supposed to do. And yet, money no longer feels safe. Not in a dramatic way, but in a subtle, persistent one. You open your bank app and the number is there, but the sense of relief you expected never fully arrives. You earn more than you used to, but the calm doesn't last. And sometimes, without being able to explain why, you feel a quiet tension around money that wasn't always there. Most people assume this feeling means something is wrong, that they're being ungrateful, or overly anxious, or failing to appreciate what they have. So they tell themselves to push it away, to earn more, to work harder, to be smarter with money. But the feeling doesn't disappear. Because this isn't a money problem, it's a relationship problem. Money is not experienced first as numbers, it is experienced as emotion. Long before money becomes logical, it becomes personal. It absorbs our earliest ideas of safety and danger. It connects itself to moments of uncertainty, stress, and vulnerability. It quietly takes on a role far bigger than it was designed for. And once that happens, no amount of income can fully calm it. This is why two people with the same salary can live in completely different emotional worlds. One feels grounded, the other feels constantly on edge. One sees money as neutral, the other feels watched by it, pressured by it, measured by it. The difference isn't intelligence, it isn't discipline, and it isn't financial literacy. It's what money is expected to do. In many modern societies, money is quietly asked to provide more than function. It's expected to reassure, to eliminate uncertainty, to create emotional safety in an unpredictable world. But money was never built for that job. In some cultures, this expectation never existed. Money was never meant to remove uncertainty from life, only to move within it. In places where wealth developed slowly, quietly, and across generations, money was treated as a tool, not a protector. Stability came from structure, from continuity, from systems designed to endure, not impress. Money was allowed to fluctuate. Life was allowed to be uncertain. And because of that, money never became emotionally heavy. But in faster and performance-driven environments, money slowly took on another role. It became proof of success, of competence, of worth. And when money carries those meanings, it stops being neutral. Every paycheck becomes emotionally loaded. Every expense feels consequential. Every comparison feels threatening. This is why earning more often makes things worse, not better. Because the more money is tied to identity, safety, and control, the more pressure it carries. And pressure turns money into something fragile, something that feels like it could slip away at any moment. When money stops feeling safe, people often blame themselves. They assume they need more discipline, more motivation, more strategy. But the truth is simpler and more human. Your reaction makes sense. Because money has been placed in a role it cannot sustain, and it has been asked to regulate fear, to compensate for uncertainty, to guarantee emotional stability, and no amount of money can permanently do that. This audiobook is not about earning more. It's not about investment tactics or financial shortcuts. It's about understanding why money feels the way it does, even when the numbers look good. Over the next chapters, we'll explore why income creates an illusion of control that eventually cracks, how early experiences quietly shape adult financial anxiety, why comparison turns money into a constant source of pressure, and how some cultures avoided this trap entirely. Not by earning more, but by expecting less from money emotionally. Most importantly, we'll explore the difference between financial safety and financial peace. Because they are not the same thing. Financial safety is structural. Financial peace is internal. And when those two are confused, money becomes heavy, no matter how much of it you earn. This is not a journey toward wealth. It's a journey toward clarity, toward understanding what money can do and what it was never meant to do. And when money is placed back into its proper role, something subtle changes. The tension softens, decisions feel lighter, and money begins to feel quieter. Not because you have more of it, but because it no longer carries your fear. That understanding is where real stability begins. Let's begin. Chapter 1. When income no longer feels like safety. For a long time, income feels like protection, not because it makes life luxurious, but because it makes life predictable. A paycheck arrives on time, bills are paid, the routine holds, and routine feels like safety. In the early years, income genuinely solves problems. It reduces immediate stress, it creates breathing room, it brings relief that feels real and earned. So the mind learns something simple and very human. If income is stable, life is stable. That belief works. Until it quietly doesn't. At some point, often without a clear reason, the feeling shifts. You still earn. You may even earn more than you ever have. But the comfort you expected doesn't arrive anymore. The paycheck shows up, yet the nervous system stays alert. There is no celebration, no exhale. Instead, there is monitoring, calculation, a subtle sense of, this needs to keep working. This is the moment income stops feeling like safety, and it's deeply confusing because nothing has gone wrong. You didn't make reckless choices, you didn't lose control, you didn't suddenly become irresponsible. From the outside, your life still looks financially solid. But inside, the emotional contract you had with income has changed. What most people don't realize is that income was never designed to carry that much responsibility. Income is movement, it is flow. It depends on factors outside of you: health, organizations, markets, timing. It responds to conditions you don't fully control. When income is asked to provide certainty, the body eventually notices the mismatch. At first, the mind tries to override this awareness. It reassures itself with logic. It focuses on numbers. It repeats familiar narratives. I'm doing fine. But the body doesn't respond to spreadsheets. The body responds to fragility, and income, no matter how high, is fragile when it stands alone. This is why the discomfort doesn't feel dramatic. It feels constant. A low-level vigilance, a sense that stability exists, but only if nothing changes. Many people try to resolve this by increasing income. More responsibility, more output, more streams. And for a moment, it helps. The numbers grow, the lifestyle expands, the sense of competence strengthens, but the tension remains because the role income is being asked to play hasn't changed. When income is treated as protection, every threat to it becomes personal. A slow quarter feels dangerous, and a company restructure feels destabilizing. A missed opportunity feels like falling behind. Income turns from support into something that must be defended, and defending something emotionally is exhausting. This is why many people with strong incomes feel more pressure, not less. Not because they are weak, but because more of their identity is tied to performance. Income quietly becomes proof of competence, of stability, of worth. And proof is never relaxing. In cultures where income was never asked to do this, the relationship with money looks different. Income was useful, but limited, necessary, but not symbolic. Stability came from structure, from systems built to absorb change. Income could fluctuate without threatening the person. But in performance-driven environments, income became something else. It became a signal. And signals are fragile. This is the point where many people turn the discomfort inward. They assume something is wrong with them. They wonder why they don't feel more secure. But the problem isn't gratitude, and it isn't mindset. It's misplacement. Income was placed in the role of emotional safety, and it cannot hold that role for long. Income can support life. It cannot stabilize identity. Income can improve comfort. It cannot regulate fear. When those lines blur, income becomes heavy, even when it's sufficient. This moment, when income no longer feels like safety, is not a failure. It's a signal that safety was being sourced from flow, not structure. And understanding that distinction is the first step toward a calmer relationship with money. In the next chapter, we'll explore why money is never experienced as logical first, and why emotional reactions to money are not weakness, but evidence of how deeply money is woven into human psychology. Chapter 2. Money is emotional long before it becomes logical. Most people believe money is a logical subject. Numbers, budgets, calculations. We talk about money as if it lives in spreadsheets and bank statements, as if it responds to reason, planning, and discipline alone. But that is not how money is actually experienced. Money enters the human mind through emotion long before it ever reaches logic. Before anyone understands interest rates or income statements, they feel money. They sense it. They react to it. They absorb it through tone of voice, tension in the room, arguments at the dinner table, or silence that feels heavy. A child doesn't need to understand finance to understand anxiety. They don't need numbers to feel uncertainty. They feel the pause before a purchase. They notice the stress around bills. They learn, not without words, whether money is something calm or something dangerous. By the time logic arrives, emotion has already set the foundation. This is why money triggers reactions that feel disproportionate, why rational people make decisions they later can't fully explain, why calm thinking disappears in moments of financial stress. It's not because people are irrational. It's because money bypasses the rational brain. It goes straight to the nervous system. When money feels threatened, the body reacts first. Heart rate changes. Muscles tighten. Attention narrows. Logic arrives later, trying to justify what the body has already decided. This is why telling someone to just be rational about money rarely works. You're asking logic to override something that was never created by logic in the first place. Most financial anxiety isn't about numbers. It's about meaning. What money represents, what it threatens, what it promises. For some people, money represents survival. For others, control. For others, dignity, freedom, or worth. These meanings are not chosen consciously. They are inherited emotionally. This is why two people can face the same financial situation and experience it completely differently. One sees a challenge. The other feels danger. One sees a temporary fluctuation. The other feels exposed. The numbers are identical. The emotional interpretations are not. And once emotion takes the lead, logic becomes defensive. It starts to serve the feeling, not question it. This is why people overspend to feel relief, why they oversave to feel control, why they avoid looking at accounts to escape discomfort. These behaviors are not mistakes. They are coping mechanisms. The mind is trying to regulate emotion, not maximize outcomes. Understanding this changes how you see financial behavior. People aren't bad with money. They're responding to emotional signals that feel real in the body. When someone says, "I know what I should do, but I can't bring myself to do it," they're not lacking information. They're experiencing an emotional conflict. Logic says one thing, emotion says another, and emotion usually wins. This is why earning more rarely solves financial anxiety, because income doesn't automatically change the emotional meaning money carries. If money represents safety, earning more can actually increase pressure. There is more to lose, more to protect, more to manage emotionally. If money represents worth, The higher income raises the stakes. Success becomes something that must be maintained. Failure feels personal. If money represents control, any uncertainty feels threatening, regardless of income level. This is how people with good incomes find themselves more anxious than before. Not because they're ungrateful, but because money has become emotionally loaded. In some cultures, money never carried this much emotional weight. It was never expected to provide reassurance or define identity. It was seen as practical, limited, and separate from self-worth. As a result, emotional reactions stayed quieter, but in environments where money became symbolic, it absorbed more meaning. It became proof of progress, of competence, of having done life correctly. And proof is fragile. It must be constantly reinforced. This is where emotional volatility enters the picture. When money is calm, you feel calm. When money feels uncertain, everything feels uncertain. Logic struggles to stabilize something that is emotionally reactive by nature. This is why financial education alone doesn't create peace. You can understand compounding, diversification, and risk management, and still feel uneasy. Because peace doesn't come from knowing more. It comes from recognizing what money is actually regulating inside you. Money often acts as a stand-in for deeper concerns. Fear of instability, fear of dependency, fear of falling behind, fear of not being enough. Until those fears are acknowledged, money will continue to feel heavy. Not because it's insufficient, but because it's carrying emotional weight it was never designed to hold. This is also why people feel shame around money. They assume emotional reactions mean weakness. They tell themselves they should be calmer, more disciplined, more detached. But emotional responses to money are not a personal flaw. They are a human pattern. Money touches survival, security, belonging. It would be strange if it didn't trigger emotion. The problem begins when emotion is misunderstood. When people try to solve emotional discomfort with financial force, more income, more control, more certainty. But certainty is not something money can permanently provide. Money moves, conditions change, life remains unpredictable. Trying to use money to eliminate uncertainty creates tension, not peace. The moment this is understood, something shifts. You stop expecting money to regulate your nervous system. You stop blaming yourself for emotional reactions that make sense. You begin to separate financial decisions from emotional regulation. This doesn't mean emotion disappears. It means it's no longer driving silently from the background. Money becomes clearer when its emotional role is recognized, not eliminated, recognized. In the next chapter, we'll look deeper into where these emotional patterns come from and how early experiences quietly shape adult financial anxiety in ways most people never connect to money at all. Chapter 3. How early money experiences shape adult anxiety. Most people believe their relationship with money was formed in adulthood, when they got their first job, when they opened their first bank account, when they started paying their own bills. But by the time those moments arrive, the relationship has already been written. Not in words, in feeling. Long before you understood money, you experienced it. You absorbed it through atmosphere, through reactions, through what happened when money was present and when it wasn't. A raised voice during a bill discussion. A long silence after an unexpected expense. A parent saying, "We can't afford that," with tension in their body. None of this required explanation. Your nervous system understood it immediately. And this is how money becomes associated with safety or danger before logic ever enters the picture. Some people grew up in environments where money was discussed calmly. Limits existed, but they were clear. Scarcity was acknowledged without panic. Others grew up around uncertainty. Bills were unpredictable. Conversations were emotionally charged. Money appeared as something fragile, easily lost, never guaranteed. And some grew up in silence. No explanation, no transparency, just an unspoken sense that money was not to be questioned. In all of these cases, the lesson wasn't about dollars, it was about stability. The nervous system learned whether the world was predictable or not. By the time adulthood arrives, these lessons feel like personality traits. I'm just cautious. I've always been anxious about money. I like to stay in control. But these aren't traits. They're adaptations. The body learned how to survive uncertainty. And once learned, those patterns don't disappear just because income increases. This is why adult financial anxiety often feels confusing. You're no longer in danger. The numbers say you're fine. But the body doesn't update its beliefs through spreadsheets. It updates through felt safety. If early experiences taught you that money disappears suddenly, the body stays alert. Even when income is stable. If money was associated with conflict, stress returns whenever financial decisions appear. If money felt unpredictable, certainty becomes something you chase endlessly. This is why some people check their accounts compulsively, why others avoid looking at them entirely. Both behaviors are attempts to regulate emotion. One seeks control, the other seeks relief. Neither is about logic, they're about comfort. What makes this especially powerful is that these patterns operate below awareness. You don't think, I'm anxious because of my childhood. You think, something feels off. So you try to fix the present. You earn more, you save more, you optimize more. But the underlying signal remains, because the past isn't asking for more money, it's asking to be recognized. Many people confuse financial responsibility with emotional suppression. They believe being good with money means having no emotional response. But emotional responses don't disappear because you ignore them. They go underground, and when they do, they show up as tension, vigilance, not exhaustion. This is why high-functioning adults often carry the most unexamined money anxiety. They learned early how to perform stability. They learned to manage appearances, to keep things together, to not cause trouble. And so their relationship with money became about maintaining order at all costs. Income became a buffer against chaos, not because chaos was happening, but because it once did. This is where adult anxiety often comes from. Not current instability, but remembered instability. The body doesn't distinguish between past and present the way the mind does. If a pattern feels familiar, it reacts as if it's happening now. This is why people feel financial urgency even when timelines are generous. Why patience feels dangerous, why slowing down feels risky. The body learned that waiting once led to loss. So it pushes for control. More saving, more earning, more certainty. But certainty never arrives. Because the source of discomfort isn't the future. It's the unresolved past. In cultures where money was approached with continuity, this pattern looks different. When stability was modeled as long-term and collective, individuals didn't carry the burden alone. Money wasn't expected to fix emotional insecurity. It was part of a larger structure. But in individualistic environments, money became personal. Your success, your failure, your responsibility. And when money becomes personal, it absorbs personal history. This is why adult money anxiety often feels lonely. It feels like something you should have outgrown, something you shouldn't still be dealing with. But nothing is wrong with you, as your nervous system learned lessons when it needed to. Those lessons kept you safe once. They're just outdated now. Understanding this doesn't mean blaming the past. It means freeing the present. When you see that your reactions are learned, not flawed, something softens. You stop fighting yourself. You stop demanding calm from a system that never learned it. And in that space, a new relationship with money becomes possible. One that doesn't require money to heal emotional history. One that doesn't ask income to protect against old fear. This is where real change begins. not by erasing emotion, but by understanding its origin. In the next chapter, we'll look at how income creates the illusion of control and why that illusion eventually breaks, no matter how successful you become. Chapter 4. Why income creates the illusion of control. Income often feels like control, not because it removes uncertainty from life, but because it creates the appearance of order. A paycheck arrives on a schedule, expenses are covered, plans can be made, and planning feels powerful. When income is stable, the mind relaxes into a simple story. As long as this continues, things are under control. But control and predictability are not the same thing. Predictability is repetition. Control is resilience. Income offers the first, but quietly pretends to be the second. This is where the illusion begins. As long as nothing changes, income feels like something you can rely on. But the moment conditions shift, its limits are revealed. A restructuring, a health issue, an industry slowdown, a decision made far above your level. And none of these events are dramatic in isolation. Yet each one exposes a truth that was always there. Income depends on systems you do not fully control. Most people know this intellectually, but they don't feel it emotionally until they have to. And when that realization arrives, it doesn't come as a clear thought. It comes as tension. The body senses vulnerability before the mind names it. This is why income-based control always feels conditional. It works as long as the environment stays friendly. But real control doesn't disappear the moment circumstances change. This is why people who rely on income for emotional safety live with constant background vigilance. They don't panic, they function. But part of them is always scanning, always checking, always calculating. Not because they are anxious by nature, but because income cannot absorb shock on its own. When income is the main source of perceived control, life feels stable only when life is predictable. And life is rarely predictable. This is where the illusion becomes exhausting. To maintain the feeling of control, income must remain uninterrupted, which means performance must remain high. Relevance must be maintained. Output must continue. Income quietly becomes something you must protect, and protection requires attention. This is why people with strong incomes often feel mentally occupied by money even when they don't need to be. They're not worried about survival, they're worried about continuity. Because continuity is what keeps the illusion intact. When continuity feels threatened, the nervous system reacts. Not with fear at first, with alertness, a tightening, a subtle readiness. This is not irrational, it's adaptive. The body has learned that when the stream is interrupted, everything depends on it, and so it stays awake. The illusion of control also explains why many people feel less free as they earn more. Their obligations grow, their lifestyle expands, their margin for disruption shrinks. They may have more money, but less tolerance for instability. This creates a paradox. From the outside, they look secure. From the inside, they feel constrained. Income has given them options, but also expectations, and expectations reduce flexibility. This is why some people hesitate to slow down even when they can afford to. Why rest feels risky, why pauses feel dangerous. Because income-based control doesn't reward stillness, it rewards consistency. But in cultures where control was defined differently, this tension looks different. Control wasn't tied to income alone. It was tied to structure, to continuity beyond the individual, to systems designed to survive change. Income was important, but not central. As a result, individuals were less emotionally entangled with income. Fluctuation didn't threaten identity. Change didn't immediately signal danger. But in environments where income became personal, control became personal too. Your income meant your competence, your stability, your value. And once control is personalized, it becomes fragile because you are fragile. Not in a weak sense, in a human sense. You get tired, you get sick, you change. Income does not adapt to those changes automatically. This is why income-based control always produces tension over time. It asks a moving stream to behave like a foundation. And when a stream is treated like a foundation, every ripple feels dangerous. This is where many people make a subtle mistake. They interpret the tension as a signal to tighten further. More effort, more hours, more control. But tightening around a fragile system doesn't make it stronger. It makes it more brittle. Real control doesn't come from forcing stability out of something that moves. It comes from building structures that expect movement. This distinction is rarely taught. Instead, people are encouraged to focus on income growth as the primary solution. But income growth without structural resilience simply increases the stakes. More to lose, more to maintain, more to defend, which is why control feels harder, not easier, at higher levels. Understanding this doesn't mean rejecting income. Income matters, but it cannot be the sole source of control. When income is placed in its proper role, something changes. You stop asking it to guarantee outcomes. You stop expecting it to remove uncertainty. You allow it to be what it is, a flow. And you begin to look elsewhere for stability, not in numbers, but in structure. In the next chapter, we'll explore how some cultures approach this differently, and how their relationship with money remained calmer, not because they earned more, but because they expected less from income emotionally. Chapter 5. How the Japanese view money differently. In some cultures, money was never asked to feel safe. It was never expected to calm fear, erase uncertainty, or guarantee emotional stability. It was expected to function quietly, consistently, within limits. In Japan, traditional attitudes toward money developed around endurance, not reassurance. Money was not something you leaned on emotionally. It was something you worked with, patiently, deliberately, and without drama. This distinction matters more than it appears. Because when money is not expected to provide emotional safety, it does not become emotionally heavy. In many Japanese households, wealth was never framed as something that should remove anxiety from life. Uncertainty was accepted as a condition of being alive. Change was expected. Stability came from preparation and not denial. Money was simply one part of a larger structure. Savings mattered, but not as comfort. They mattered as buffer. Work mattered, but not as identity. It mattered as contribution. There was a clear separation between money and self-worth. Money could fluctuate. The person did not. This is why, historically, wealth in Japan grew slowly, not because people lacked ambition, but because they valued continuity over acceleration. Decisions were made with decades in mind, not quarters. A business was not something to scale aggressively. It was something to sustain. A career was not something to extract from. It was something to inhabit. This long-term orientation changed the emotional relationship with money. Money was not something that had to perform emotionally today. It did not need to impress. It did not need to reassure, as it only needed to continue. This created a calm relationship with uncertainty. When income fluctuated, it was not immediately interpreted as danger. It was interpreted as part of the cycle. There was less urgency to react, less pressure to optimize constantly. And because of that, money stayed quieter. Compare this to environments where money became symbolic, where income is expected to prove competence, where financial success signals personal value, where money quietly answers the question, "Am I doing well enough?" In those environments, money carries emotional weight. Every number means something. Every change feels personal. But in the Japanese mindset, money was rarely asked those questions. Identity came from role, discipline, and contribution, not income. This separation reduced emotional volatility. The money did not need to be watched constantly. It did not need to be defended emotionally. It was respected, not feared. Another important difference lies in how control was understood. Control was not defined as eliminating uncertainty. It was defined as being prepared for it. This is why systems mattered so much. Emergency reserves, redundancy, processes designed to absorb shock. Control was structural, not emotional. Money supported the structure. It did not replace it. This meant that individuals were not left alone with the responsibility of feeling safe. Safety came from order, from predictability and process, not outcome. You could not control the future, but you could control your preparation for it. This mindset prevented money from becoming a source of constant vigilance, because vigilance was replaced by readiness. There is a subtle psychological difference between the two. Vigilance keeps the nervous system activated. Readiness allows it to rest. In cultures where money was used to regulate emotion, vigilance became the norm. Check more, plan more, optimize more. In cultures where money was used to support structure, readiness was enough. You prepared, then you lived. This is why many people raised in these systems did not feel compelled to constantly think about money. Not because they didn't care, but because money was doing the job it was assigned, and nothing more. It's important to understand that this approach did not make people passive. Discipline was high, standards were strong, responsibility was taken seriously. But pressure was distributed. Money was not carrying the emotional burden of making life feel secure. Life was allowed to be uncertain. This acceptance reduced fear, and reduced fear changes behavior. People didn't rush decisions. They didn't chase trends aggressively. They didn't panic during downturns. They trusted continuity more than momentum. This is a sharp contrast to cultures that reward speed, where success is measured in visible growth, where stagnation is treated as failure. In those environments, money becomes something that must constantly validate progress, and validation creates anxiety. The Japanese approach offers a different perspective, not a strategy to copy, but a lens to reflect through. It shows what happens when money is not asked to do emotional labor, when safety comes from structure, when identity comes from role, when patience is valued over urgency. Money becomes quieter, not because there is more of it, but because it is no longer overloaded with meaning. This does not mean one system is better than the other. It means expectations matter. When you expect money to calm your nervous system, it eventually fails. When you expect money to support a structure, it performs consistently. Understanding this difference allows you to rethink your own relationship with money. Not by changing culture, not by abandoning ambition, but by reconsidering what you ask money to do. Money can support your life. It cannot hold your fear, and the moment you stop asking it to, the relationship begins to change. In the next chapter, we'll look at how comparison quietly undoes this balance, and why even calm relationships with money can become tense in environments that constantly invite comparison. Chapter 6. How comparison quietly turns. Money into fear, comparison rarely feels aggressive. It doesn't arrive as jealousy or resentment. It arrives quietly, in passing thoughts, in casual glances, in moments that seem harmless. Someone mentions a promotion, a friend buys a new home, a colleague talks about an investment that did really well. Nothing dramatic happens, and yet something shifts. Not in your income, not in your balance, in your nervous system. Comparison doesn't change numbers. It changes meaning. Money that once felt sufficient begins to feel exposed. Progress that once felt solid begins to feel behind. Stability that once felt earned begins to feel temporary. This is how money turns from neutral into threatening. Not because it disappeared, but because it was measured against someone else's trajectory. Most people believe comparison is a conscious habit. They assume it happens only when they actively judge themselves against others. But the most powerful comparisons are unconscious. They slip in through context. Social media feeds, office conversations, casual updates shared without intent. You're not trying to compete, you're just absorbing information. And the nervous system is quietly recalibrating what enough means. This is where fear begins, because comparison reframes money from a tool into a scoreboard. And scoreboards create pressure. When money becomes comparative, it stops answering the question, "Am I stable?" It starts answering a different one. Where do I stand? And standing is never secure. There is always someone ahead, always someone accelerating faster, always another benchmark to meet. This is why comparison is exhausting. It turns a personal financial life into a public performance. Even when no one is watching, even when no one is judging, the body reacts as if it is. This is why people feel more anxious about money in connected environments. Not because they are weaker, but because they are constantly exposed to other people's outcomes without context. You see the promotion, not the pressure. You see the new home, not the debt. You see the success, not the sleepless nights. Comparison strips away complexity, and when complexity disappears, fear grows. Because the mind fills in the gaps with assumptions. They're doing better. I should be further along. I'm falling behind. None of these thoughts require evidence. They only require proximity. This is why money anxiety increases even as incomes rise. Because comparison scales infinitely. No amount ever feels final when the reference point keeps moving. This is also why people who once felt calm begin to feel restless. They didn't lose discipline. They didn't become irresponsible. Their environment changed. Their financial life became visible. And visibility changes behavior. Money that was once private becomes something to measure against others, and measurement invites judgment, not from others, from yourself. This internal judgment is subtle but relentless. It asks questions money was never meant to answer. Am I doing enough? Am I progressing fast enough? Am I as capable as they are? Money becomes the proxy for these questions. And when money is used to measure self-worth, fear is inevitable. Because self-worth is never stable. It fluctuates with perception. This is why comparison undermines even strong financial structures. It bypasses logic. You may know your situation is solid, you may understand your plan, but comparison doesn't argue with plans. It triggers instinct, and instinct reacts faster than reason. In cultures where money remained private, this effect was muted. Not because people didn't notice differences, but because differences weren't constantly displayed. Without constant comparison, money stayed contextual. It was about function, not ranking. But in environments where financial signals are everywhere, money becomes performative. It begins to answer social questions, and social questions are never neutral. This is where fear quietly enters the relationship. Not as panic, as tension, a sense that something must be maintained, that falling behind is dangerous, that slowing down is risky. This is why people push themselves financially even when they don't need to. They don't want more money. They want relief from comparison. But comparison doesn't disappear when income increases. It adapts. New peers, new benchmarks, new expectations. The finish line moves, and money remains heavy. Understanding this changes how you see financial pressure. It's not always about ambition. Often it's about exposure. The more you see, the more you compare. The more you compare, the more money feels like a test. And tests activate fear. This doesn't mean comparison can be eliminated. It means it must be understood. Comparison is not a failure of character. It's a response to social signals. But when those signals dominate, money loses its original purpose. It stops supporting life. It starts defining it. This is the moment when money becomes emotionally dangerous. Not because it controls your actions, but because it controls your perception. Perception of progress, perception of sufficiency, perception of safety. When perception shifts, fear follows. The quiet solution is not disengagement, it's reorientation, returning money to a private role. Letting it answer personal questions, not social ones. This is not about isolation, it's about boundaries. Boundaries protect clarity, and clarity is what allows money to feel neutral again. In the next chapter, we'll explore the difference between financial safety and financial peace, and why many people have built one while quietly lacking the other. Chapter 7. Financial safety is not the same as financial peace. Many people believe financial safety and financial peace are the same thing. They assume that once safety is achieved, peace naturally follows. That when the numbers look right, the mind will relax. That when income is stable and plans are in place, worry will fade. But for many people, that moment never arrives. They build safety. They do everything correctly. They reach the milestones they once thought would bring calm. And yet, peace remains out of reach. This is one of the most confusing experiences in adult life, because it challenges a deeply held assumption that money problems are solved by money. Financial safety is structural. It is about buffers, margins, and preparation. It is about the ability to absorb shocks without immediate harm. It is measurable, practical, and necessary. Financial peace is internal. It is about how money feels inside your body. It is about whether financial thoughts create tension or neutrality. It is not visible from the outside. You can have one without the other. And many people do. They build safety, but never experience peace. This happens because safety answers external risks, while peace responds to internal ones. Safety protects against events. Peace regulates perception, and perception is shaped by far more than numbers. Someone with strong financial safety may still feel anxious because peace requires a different condition. Peace requires trust. Not trust in income, not trust in markets, trust in one's ability to handle uncertainty. This trust is not created by accumulation alone. It is created by clarity. The clarity about what money can control and what it cannot. When money is expected to eliminate uncertainty, peace becomes impossible, because uncertainty is not a flaw in the system. It is a feature of life. Financial safety can reduce exposure to uncertainty. It cannot remove it. When this distinction is misunderstood, people chase peace through safety. They add more buffers, more planning, more control. And while safety increases, peace does not. Because peace is not built by eliminating every possible risk. It is built by accepting that risk exists and knowing you can meet it. This is why some people with modest means feel calm, while others with significant resources feel tense. The difference is not intelligence or discipline. It is expectation. Those who feel peace do not expect money to carry emotional responsibility. They do not ask money to reassure them constantly. They do not ask it to validate their progress or protect their identity. Money is allowed to do its job, and no more. Those who lack peace often place emotional weight on money without realizing it. They expect it to signal success, to confirm worth, to justify choices. And when money is asked to answer emotional questions, it becomes unstable. Because emotions fluctuate. This is why peace cannot be achieved through comparison, accumulation, or optimization. Those strategies increase safety, but they also increase pressure. More to manage, more to protect, more to think about. Peace requires a different orientation. It requires separation between money and identity, between income and self-worth, between outcomes and meaning. When these are fused, Money becomes emotionally charged. Every change feels personal. Every fluctuation feels threatening. When they are separated, money regains neutrality. This does not mean becoming indifferent. It means becoming grounded. Grounded enough to see money clearly. Grounded enough to respond rather than react. Financial peace often arrives quietly. Not at the moment of a major financial achievement, but at the moment of a psychological shift. The moment you realize that money does not need to make you feel safe. Safety comes from structure. Peace comes from understanding. Understanding that uncertainty does not equal danger. Understanding that stability is not the same as control. Understanding that money can support your life without defining it. This understanding allows the nervous system to relax. You said because it no longer has to monitor money constantly. Money stops being a signal to watch. It becomes a resource to use. This is why peace feels different from safety. Safety is alert. Peace is settled. Safety asks, what if something goes wrong? Peace asks, if something goes wrong, can I handle it? The second question is far more calming, because it restores agency. Agency does not come from predicting every outcome. It comes from trusting your capacity to respond. This trust cannot be bought. It must be built. Built through experience, reflection, and clarity. Built by noticing that you have handled uncertainty before. Built by recognizing that fear often exaggerates risk. Built by releasing the belief that money must guarantee emotional comfort. When this belief loosens, peace becomes possible. Not because life becomes certain, but because uncertainty becomes tolerable. This is the quiet difference many people never articulate. They say they want more money, but what they actually want is less tension. They want relief. Relief does not come from higher numbers. It comes from a healthier relationship. A relationship where money is respected, but not feared. Where it is planned for, but not obsessed over. Where it supports life instead of supervising it. Financial safety remains important. It provides space. It reduces vulnerability. It allows choices. But peace determines how that safety is experienced. Without peace, safety feels temporary. With peace, even modest safety feels sufficient. This is why some people continue to chase more, even when they are safe. They are trying to buy peace through structure. But peace does not respond to accumulation. It responds to clarity. Clarity about what matters. Clarity about limits. Clarity about where responsibility ends. In the next chapter, we will explore what happens when this clarity finally settles, and how money begins to feel different when it is no longer experienced as a threat. Chapter 8. When money finally stops. Feeling threatening. For most people, money never feels threatening all at once. It becomes threatening slowly, not through crisis, not through loss, but through accumulation of meaning. At some point, money stops being a neutral tool and starts carrying emotional responsibility. It begins to represent safety, competence, progress, worth. And once money holds those meanings, it becomes something you monitor, something you defend, something you worry about even when it's present. This is why money can feel threatening even in abundance, not because it's unstable, but because too much depends on it. When money finally stops feeling threatening, it's not because life becomes predictable. It's because money is released from roles it was never meant to play. This shift does not happen through force. You don't decide to feel calm about money. Calm emerges when clarity replaces expectation, when you stop asking money to guarantee emotional outcomes. Most people believe peace arrives at a financial milestone, a number, a net worth, a level of income. But those milestones rarely deliver what they promise. Because peace is not triggered by achievement. It's triggered by alignment. Alignment between what money can do and what you expect it to do. When money is allowed to be functional instead of symbolic, its emotional charge fades. You still care, you still plan, you still prepare. But you don't watch it constantly. You don't measure yourself through it. You don't feel personally threatened by its movement. This is the moment money becomes quieter, not invisible, just quieter. You notice it less because it no longer needs your attention to regulate fear. Your nervous system no longer treats money as an emergency signal. It becomes background infrastructure, present, useful, but not dominant. This is what many people misunderstand about peace. They think peace means never thinking about money. In reality, peace means thinking about money without tension, without urgency, without self-judgment, without fear disguised as responsibility. This change often arrives subtly. You notice it in how you react. A bill arrives and your body doesn't tighten. An expense appears and you don't spiral. A comparison surfaces and it passes without sticking. Nothing dramatic happens, but everything feels different because the emotional loop has been interrupted. Money is no longer supervising your sense of safety. So safety comes from elsewhere now, from structure, from preparation, from understanding your own capacity to respond. When this happens, you stop chasing certainty. You accept that uncertainty is not the enemy, it's the condition. Life remains unpredictable. Markets fluctuate, income changes. But unpredictability no longer equals danger, because danger was never about the future. It was about fear being unmanaged in the present. This is why people who reach this state don't talk about it much. There is nothing to prove. They don't feel compelled to optimize constantly. They don't feel rushed. They don't feel behind. Money does not define their timeline. It supports it. This is also why their decisions tend to look slower, more deliberate, less reactive, not because they lack ambition, but because fear is no longer driving momentum. They don't need money to reassure them, so they don't force it to perform emotionally. They let it do its job. And when money does only its job, it performs well. This is the quiet paradox. The less you ask money to protect you emotionally, the more stable the relationship becomes. Because stability is not about clinging, it's about trust. Trust that you can adapt. Trust that structure holds. Trust that fear doesn't need to be eliminated to be manageable. When money finally stops feeling threatening, you don't feel euphoric. You feel settled, grounded, less interested in proving, less concerned with comparison, less reactive to fluctuation. You don't feel rich. You feel sufficient. And sufficiency is profoundly calming. It restores proportion. Money takes its place among other parts of life. Important, but not central. Necessary, but not dominant. You begin to notice how much energy was previously spent monitoring money emotionally, how much attention it required, and how much space is freed when that attention returns to life. Relationships feel clearer. Decisions feel less urgent. Time feels less compressed. This is not because money solved everything. It's because money stopped interfering with everything. This is the end point of a healthier relationship. Not detachment, not indifference, but right-sizing. Money is no longer your protector, no longer your judge, no longer your measure. It's a tool, and tools don't threaten you. They support you. This understanding doesn't make you passive. It makes you precise. You plan where planning matters. You prepare where preparation helps. You let go where control is impossible. This balance is where peace lives. Not in certainty, but in clarity. When money finally stops feeling threatening, it's not because you won. It's because you stopped fighting uncertainty, stopped fighting emotion, stopped fighting reality. You accepted the limits of money, and in doing so, freed yourself from its emotional weight. This is not an ending. It's a return to money as a neutral presence in life, a return to stability that doesn't require constant attention, a return to a pace that feels human. And when money rests in that place, something important becomes possible. Life feels lighter, not because there is more, but because less is being asked of it. There is another quiet change that happens when money stops feeling threatening. You begin to notice how rarely you actually need certainty. Most of the stress around money was never about real danger. It was about anticipation, about imagining futures that hadn't happened yet, about preparing emotionally for outcomes that never arrived. When money is no longer responsible for calming those thoughts, the imagination settles. You stop rehearsing worst-case scenarios. You stop mentally negotiating with the future. You stop asking money to promise things it cannot promise. This frees up attention. Attention that was once consumed by monitoring, planning, and second-guessing begins to return to the present. You listen better. You decide slower. You notice when enough is actually enough. This is often when people realize how distorted their sense of urgency had become. They were moving quickly, not because speed was required, but because fear was pushing. When fear steps back, pace adjusts naturally. You don't become careless, you become deliberate. You choose stability without obsessing over it. You prepare without gripping tightly. You accept that some outcomes will always remain unknown. And surprisingly, this acceptance makes you more resilient, not less. Because resilience doesn't come from predicting every risk. It comes from knowing you can respond when risk appears. Money supports that response. It does not replace it. This is the final shift in the relationship. Money stops being the thing that stands between you and uncertainty. It becomes one of the tools you carry as you move through it. When this happens, the emotional volume around money lowers permanently. Not because circumstances never change, but because change no longer feels like a personal threat. And in that quieter space, something subtle but important emerges. Trust, not blind optimism, not denial, but a grounded trust in your ability to adapt. This trust is what allows money to finally rest. And when money rests, so do you. If there is one idea to take with you from this audiobook, it is not about money. It is about relief. Relief from the belief that money must constantly make you feel safe. Relief from the pressure to feel calm only when the numbers look right. Relief from the quiet fear that something is wrong with you for still feeling uneasy. Nothing is wrong with you. What you've been experiencing is not failure. It's awareness. An awareness that money was carrying too much emotional responsibility in your life. Throughout these chapters, we didn't talk about getting rich faster. We didn't talk about strategies, shortcuts, or outcomes. We talked about something more fundamental, the role money was asked to play. When money is asked to be a protector, it becomes heavy. When it is asked to be a judge, it becomes threatening. When it is asked to define worth, it becomes exhausting. But when money is allowed to be what it actually is, a tool, the relationship changes. Not dramatically, quietly. You stop checking as often. You stop reacting as quickly. You stop interpreting every fluctuation as a signal about your future. You don't stop caring, you stop carrying. This is what emotional stability looks like. Not indifference, not detachment, but proportion. And money matters, but it no longer dominates your inner world. This is why true wealth is often invisible. It doesn't announce itself through urgency. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't need to be proven. It shows up as calm decision-making, as patience, as the ability to tolerate uncertainty without panic. Many people chase wealth thinking it will remove fear. But fear doesn't respond to accumulation. It responds to understanding. Understanding what money can do. Understanding what it cannot do. Understanding where responsibility ends. When those boundaries are clear, money becomes quieter. And in that quiet, something important becomes available. Time, attention, presence. You begin to notice how much of your life was spent anticipating financial outcomes instead of living the present moment. How many decisions were rushed, how much rest felt undeserved, how often urgency replaced clarity. As money steps back into its proper place, life expands forward. Relationships feel less transactional. Work feels less threatening. Rest feels permissible. Not because you've achieved perfection, but because you've stopped asking money to carry fear for you. This is not the end of a journey. It's a return to a relationship with money that is functional, respectful, and calm. A return to a pace that doesn't require constant proof. A return to enough. If this audiobook resonated with you, it's likely because you are never chasing money. You are chasing relief, and relief doesn't come from more. It comes from clarity, from seeing that stability is built, not earned emotionally, from knowing that peace is internal, not numerical, from trusting your ability to respond to life as it unfolds. That trust is real wealth, quiet, steady, durable. If you found value here, you don't need to do anything immediately. Just notice what feels different. Notice how money feels after understanding it more clearly. Notice what softens when expectation loosens. And if you feel called to, you're welcome to share this audiobook with someone who may be carrying the same quiet tension around money. Sometimes, understanding is the most valuable thing we can pass on. Thank you for listening.